basically the overarching message is an escalation, an all-out regional war serves no one's interests. That is the point that the US has been hammering over and over and over again for months now on every trip that Secretary Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, has taken to the region. That has been his message, both in front of the cameras and behind the scenes. The majority of actions that we've seen over the last few months have just been tactics. They haven't really been strategic moves moving the region to a less heated scenario, a less heated situation, a long-term, sustainable, peaceful situation moving forward, right? It's been one thing after the other, one actor responding to the next. And so there's a real need to break that cycle. And this is a really seminal moment right now. It's a critical moment. We have to see whether Israel is going to heed the advice of President Biden, the US president, who said, this is a win, take the win. We will not support you in an offensive attack against Iran, and we don't want this to escalate any further. Will the Israelis take that advice, or will they see it necessary to counterattack against Iran, which in itself, the Iranian attack was a counterattack, of course, to the Israeli strike on their diplomatic facilities in Syria. And so this is a really critical moment where, one hopes that cooler heads will prevail and people will see people in power, both in Israel, of course, with the advice of the US, as well as Iran and its proxies, to see that it is in no one's interest to escalate the situation further.
You say it's in no one's interest to escalate. I mean, if one was casting a very cynical lens on this, you could argue it is in the interests of Benjamin Netanyahu to continue this, because it's a bit of a distraction from what's going in Gaza, and it sort of shores him up because of course the people of Israel are going to feel very sort of triggered by this. Does it not? Is there not some advantage in him to sort of keep a war of words going with Iran and keep this in play?
That's a really great question. And I think, the answer basically is yes, but to a certain point. And that point is not a point that I think Prime Minister Netanyahu can control. And this is what's so risky about this brinksmanship that we're seeing between Iran and Israel now, is that there's the plan. And then there's what actually happens. And so, of course, it is currently in Prime Minister Netanyahu's interest to continue playing this game with Iran, because as your previous guest was saying, it actually has taken attention off of Israel's actions in Gaza, the famine in Gaza, the number of people displaced in Gaza, the Rafah operation and how it shouldn't happen. No one's talking about these things anymore. No one is talking right now about conditioning aid to Israel or suspending aid to Israel. So that works in his favor, but it's only up to a certain point. Because once the Israelis counterattack against Iran, all bets are off. We don't really know how Iran would respond. We have to remember that Iran has proxies all over the region, all of which are capable of attacking Israel, Israeli interests, and US interests across the entire region, as well as in the Red Sea, of course, which we've been seeing from the Houthis. And so once that really gets going, I don't think that Israel wants to be fighting a multi-pronged war around the region from every which way. I don't think that that is in its favor.
And Jasmine, you've been a very, very high-level Middle East advisor for the US Department of Defense. Just talk to us about some of the behind-the-scenes diplomacy that will be going on in the region at the moment to try and make sure that this doesn't de-escalate. For example, you're in Amman right now. What's the reception been like in Jordan? What will Qatar be doing? What will Egypt be doing behind the scenes? What will Saudi Arabia be doing behind the scenes?
I think it's really important to do exactly what you're saying, which is to really think about what every actor in the region is going to be thinking and what they need to be talking about, discussing, and keeping in mind when it comes to their own domestic audiences. So, for example, as you mentioned, here in Jordan, the reaction has been mixed. Some people are saying that Jordan absolutely had every right and obligation to shoot down those drones because they were violating Jordanian sovereign airspace. And then, of course, you have others who are saying that the Jordanians shouldn't have come to Israel's defense. And so the reaction is mixed, but either way, it does, of course, put pressure on the Jordanians, right? And so when the US is having behind the scenes conversations with the Israelis, with the Iranians through intermediaries, with the Saudis, the Qataris, of course, and the Egyptians, every, the basically the overarching message is an escalation, an all-out regional war serves no one's interests. That is the point that the US has been hammering over and over and over again for months now on every trip that Secretary Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, has taken to the region. That has been his message, both in front of the cameras and behind the scenes. And so you'll see conversations like the one that we heard about yesterday between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Joe Biden, when President Biden was saying, that's it, you need to stop, we need to focus, you need to look at what you're doing in Gaza, you need to look at how your long-term security is going to play out. Of course, both the Israelis, the Saudis, and the United States were in normalization talks, hoping to strike a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel to normalize relations. That's still a big on their wish list, all of them. That looks farther away than ever now, and it will continue to look farther away than ever the more and more this escalates. And so really, you will see, as I said before, cooler heads trying to prevail, trying to convince the Iranians, the Israelis to lower the temperature and to start looking at what a long-term sustainable future for this region looks like. And that includes, first and foremost, ending this awful war in Gaza and coming back to the negotiating table and putting a political pathway forward to peace.